So what I've done here is I've set the steady up. I had the part turned around, so I've got a centre in the other end, and I set the steady to match the other end and spun the job around. Now I can clean this end up, bring it to dimension to fit the plate that's bolted to the underneath of the faceplate. So I just want to clean it up, and then I'm going to use that annular cutter I made the arbor for the other day, probably, to cut a hole in that bit of inch plate, and I'm going to see how accurate that is to the, well, when I'd done the first hole in that 5/8 plate, it was pretty much smack on from memory. I'll just machine this to suit that hole. Okay, that's cleaned up, shampooed enough for now. I'll go back and I'll work on the actual plate on the mill. The whole idea of this exercise was just to see how steady it was. So it's not getting a bad finish with that insert. So. That's centered up good enough for that hole. I think we're right to have a go. Just hope everything goes well. .09. I reckon that's a lot to do with me, to be honest, because this head is not 100% trammed in. It is kicked off one way, and I didn't even give it a thought. Anyway, my bad. The slug came out easy. It's still useful for something somewhere along the line. I just wish I had checked that or done that tram first. So I reckon if I take another 2mm neat, we'll be on the money. That way will fit. Chamfer this edge, and this shaft is done, because I just got to put a weld prep on there actually. Right, we'll see how we got it. That's it. That can be welded in. What I've done here, I've put a mark here at 50mm from this end. Off camera I've made up this boss, if you want to call it that. Now it's got a 1 thou interference fit onto this end of the shaft. Put in the press it down to that line, and then I can either Loctite that on or weld that on this side. Just put a couple of tacks on it just to hold it there for now. And then when I push this on, or when this goes on, it'll be square then to the shaft. So it's got a bit more meat there too by the time I weld around the outside onto the 3/4 plate. It'll just make it that bit stiffer, I think. Probably overkill, probably miles overkill, but well, we're going to do it. Starting to press this down. I don't know whether you can pick the line up down there, probably not. That's where it's got to go to. It's a fairly tight fit. That's it. Pretty impressed with that porta power in that press. Quite impressed actually. So now the plate can sit on the top of there and it's got more of a base, you know. The square tube has a seam, so I'm just going to use a ball end mill just to machine a slot. So this one's going about 200 mil down into the tube, so instead of trying to knock the seam out, it's just as easy to put a groove in this. That's how it turned out. Pretty good. I'll do the other one now. I'll just whip that through off camera. Well, I've got both of these done now. So now I can put the actual square tube up in the mill and mill out the slots where these are going to get welded into the tube. Okay, I've centered on that. I've got some marks on the top here, and I'm going to put a 1/4 inch slot on all 4 sides in the centre, and these go in, and they can be welded in the slots. I've got to flip this over now and try and keep it in the same location. So I'll set up a stop on this end and then I'll bring this back. A bit agricultural, but it's a good stop, solid. Well, that really turned out pretty good. So the idea is now is to screw these onto the threaded bar, plonk these down into there, and tack all 4 spots. Make sure the bar's winding up and down easily, and then just keep tacking round and round and round so it doesn't sort of pull the nuts too hard, I think. Keep everything aligned. This is where it gets a bit nervy, because once it goes in I don't think I'm going to be able to get it back out. So I think it's going to have a couple of good biffs with a hammer to get it down in there. So it's about knackered, wouldn't you? That's it. There we go. Rightio, these are ready to weld in. I just stuck a bit of angle over that thread when I weld it, so no spatter gets on the thread. It's all welded in. Okay, so yesterday when I was trying to figure out how I'm going to make a lock for this, to lock the thread into place so I can't turn, I was looking through the scrap pile, and this piece of aluminium, it had about 1.5 inch hole in the guts. It's pretty real tatty on the outside. So I spun it up, cleaned up the outside and bored it out to a fraction over, or it's a nice slip fit with a little bit of play around that threaded bar. Machined down a register that I've just got to put a little nick in it now where that seam is, and that'll slide in there. And then 4 set screws, or 4 grub screws, 6mm grub screws, will hold that into place. Once that's in, then I'll machine these 4 sides down so they're square at the top. And it's not going to be a perfect square, it's going to have a little radius. It's not going to quite fill up into the corners, but so be it. And then drill and tap 2 holes 90 degrees to each other that I can put an M8 bolt in, and they'll have a brass pad, just a little bit of brass on the end that'll push up against the thread when they're done up, and that'll be able to lock everything into place. Okay, 2 M8 holes, one here and one 90 degrees. I have made up 2 little tiny brass plugs, so drill and tap these M8. Beautiful. Okay, you see me do one, I'll do the other one off camera and fit it up. Yeah, so they'll just push up with the up against the side of the thread and hopefully lock it. But that was the quickest, easiest way I could think of making a lock for it. Yeah, that locks up beautiful. Could have got off. Seriously, could have got away with just one. Anyway, it's got two. Now, next I have to put the cross on the bottom. I have to weld this boss to the shaft and then weld the plate to the top here and to the boss. Once that's done, bolt the table on. Okay, so that's how I'm going to do the base for this table. I just got to make sure I get everything square, flat. Well, it's Sunday morning and pretty hard to film here on a weekend. So I've welded the bottom base up. There's nothing special there. Just about to put the stem on and get it level and straight. As this being across, it has got a little bit of wobble in it. I got this tacked into place. I've just put the rod in. So you can see that's level there. It's level there. So theoretically, it's got to be level. I'm just getting ready to TIG this top plate on. I've just a couple of clamps onto the boss underneath, just so it can't move, and tack it in a couple of spots, take the clamps off, weld it around with the TIG. It should be alright, and I can just grind it flat if it is a bit raised. Anyway, so now what I can do is, this little dimple there, let's knock that little doobie off. I'll get the gantry set up, bring the faceplate over and set it on it, see how it's going to look. Maybe jiggle this around and get them bolts in. I think that needs a bit of oil, huh? Squeals like a bastard going down, but it's all got to come back apart again and be painted, so I'll put some grease in that bottom nut and the top nut. Really have to put some adjustable feet on the bottom because it has got a bit of a rock, which for what the gear I've got to get stuff, I haven't got a welding table or anything like that. So it is pretty hard to get shit level. Next job is to put some feet on the bottom, just some bloody adjustable feet, and paint the base, and I've got to get in and somehow clean that table up back to a shiny top again. This one was a fraction under the size for that hole, so I just put a couple of centre pot marks on it. Hopefully that'll be enough to hold it in there. But they're going to get TIG welded underneath, so that's it. TIG weld in there now. After I make 3 more of them, and then chuck them back up in the lathe, spin the outside true, put a chamfer on it, weld the nuts into the leg, then into the feet on the frame of the table. These will be the feet, adjustable feet then. That's how they're going to work. I'm not going to worry about putting casters on this table. I think it'd be more of a pain in the bum than anything. The workshop's not that big, they've got to wheel it everywhere. So just drill the rest of these out and I can get these mounted and the nuts welded in on the other side here. There's the feet in place, all 4. I've just got to weld inside these nuts here. Just weld them on the all 4 of them, and then just loosen the lock nut underneath, wind the legs down to take any play out, nip the nut back up, and it should be pretty steady. Okay, so I gave it a quick lick of paint. All I got to get for it is 4 end caps, 75mm end caps. It's not worth welding a patch in just in case something happens with them locking nuts and they jam up. For them feet, I want to be able to get back into there. Well, I just stuck a bit of oil and graphite powder down there too. So won't do it any harm because I can't stop it squealing when you put the stem in. Oh, there's oil and there's graphite powder in there. I don't know what else to do, so it is what it is. All I gotta do now is wait for the paint to dry and then, yeah, buff the top up. Make it all nice and shiny. And I have to make up a ring, a centre ring. Otherwise everything's just going to collect in there. It needs a nice aluminium ring. Well, here we go. After a bit of wire wheeling, that's what we ended up with. I'm pretty happy with that. I did end up making a quick aluminium disc. I set it in there and it was sitting there beautifully. It's only about 10mm thick, this disc. It went like that and that's where it ended up. It's now got to pop the table back off and put a standoff underneath. I didn't even I just sat it in there and it sits nice and sitting just proud of fractions. I just tapped it down and it just kept going down. Bad mistake. Well, I really hope you guys have enjoyed this build because I've had a blast making this. Cutting that long thread, that's the longest one I've ever done. And looking back at it, I should have made that a double start thread because to wind this all the way up and all the way back down, she takes a fair bit of spinning. But it's not going to go up all that often. It's not going to come, I don't need the lift function all the time, but it's good to have. Like sitting on the stool here now, you could quite happily do a bit of TIG welding here, no drums at all. And if you stood up, wind it up a bit, it's quite easy to do it there. So I am over the moon with this. Good solid table. I'm really happy. Thanks guys, don't forget, hit the subscribe button. I don't often ask, but if you don't mind, just whack it one. Thanks guys, see yous after.